My brother bullied me all day at a family event. My husband couldn't take it anymore and hit him, and now my parents have given me an ultimatum. This past weekend was supposed to be a relaxing, fun time with my family. My husband, 32M, and I, 29F, were invited to my parents' house for a barbecue, and we were looking forward to a carefree day of good food, laughter, and catching up with everyone. It had been a while since we'd had a big family gathering, so I was genuinely excited. And for the first few hours, everything was perfect. The sun was shining, my dad was at the grill making his famous burgers, my mom was fussing over everyone as usual, making sure we all had drinks and enough food. The kids were running around, playing, and the atmosphere was warm and inviting. My husband was having a great time talking with my uncles, and I was catching up with my cousins and some old family friends. Then, out of nowhere, my brother, 35M, started taking jabs at me. At first, it was subtle, little passive-aggressive comments that could be passed off as jokes. He made a few digs about my career, saying things like, "Must be nice having a job where you barely do anything," which was already annoying because I work my ass off. Then he started commenting on my appearance, saying I looked different in a way that clearly wasn't meant as a compliment. I tried to ignore it. I rolled my eyes and brushed it off, thinking maybe he'd had a few too many beers. But the comments didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. Over the next hour, he kept belittling me in front of everyone. He mocked the way I talked, dismissed my opinions when I joined conversations, and at one point even laughed at my marriage, saying something along the lines of, "I don't even know how he puts up with you." That one stung. I kept my cool, but I could feel my face getting hot. I didn't understand where this was coming from. My brother and I have never been best friends, but we've never had a major falling out either. Sure, we've had our share of sibling arguments growing up, but nothing that would explain why he was acting so cruelly toward me now. My husband noticed. He could see I was getting upset, and he wasn't about to let it slide. Without making a scene, he pulled my brother aside to have a private conversation. I wasn't close enough to hear what was said, but when they came back, my brother seemed annoyed, and my husband had that look on his face, the one that told me he had made himself very clear. For a while, my brother backed off. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. About an hour later, we were standing around in a small group, some friends, some extended family, just casually chatting when my brother walked up to me again. This time, there was no build-up, no subtle digs. He looked me dead in the eye and, loud enough for everyone around us to hear, said, "You know you're a fucking whore, right?" The entire backyard went silent. I was in shock, completely frozen. The words hit me like a slap across the face, and for a few seconds, I couldn't even react. My mind was scrambling to process what had just happened, why he would say something so disgusting to me, especially in front of my entire family. Before I could say or do anything, I felt a sudden, firm push, just enough to move me to the side. Then, in a blur, my husband stepped in front of me, and the next thing I knew, my brother was on the ground. Out cold. Blood smeared across his face. My husband had knocked him out. The silence was shattered by my mother screaming. My dad rushed forward to check on my brother, and my husband stood over him, looking completely unbothered, as he said, "I warned you. You don't talk to my wife like that." For those wondering, no, my husband didn't hurt me. The push was just a quick movement to get me out of the way before things escalated. I stumbled back maybe a step, but that was it. I wasn't scared of him. If anything, I was relieved that someone had finally shut my brother up. But that relief didn't last long. Because now, my parents are furious. Not at my brother. At my husband. They pulled me aside after the chaos settled, and that's when they gave me the ultimatum. Either I leave my husband and divorce him, or they cut me off completely. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I kept waiting for them to acknowledge what my brother had said to me, to recognize how disgusting and inappropriate it was. But they didn't. Their only concern was that my husband had thrown a punch. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. How could they possibly be okay with what my brother did? How could they expect me to turn my back on the man who defended me when they stood by and said nothing? My husband, for his part, doesn't care that they're mad. The only thing he's frustrated about is that he only got one punch in. And honestly, I can't even be mad at him for it. I love my husband. That has never been in question. He has always been my biggest protector and supporter, and I know without a doubt that he would never let anyone talk to me the way my brother did. I don't regret that he stood up for me, but I also love my family. My parents have always been there for me. They helped me through school, supported me through tough times, and have always been a huge part of my life. This is the first time they've ever given me an ultimatum, and I know they're serious. To make things worse, they've also threatened to press assault charges against my husband. He's completely unbothered and told them to go ahead, but the idea of this turning into a legal nightmare makes me feel sick. I feel like I'm stuck in an impossible situation. No matter what I do, someone I love is going to get hurt. I don't want to lose my husband, but I also don't want to lose my parents. And even though some friends and extended family members have reached out to support me, many of them still say that my husband was in the wrong for hitting my brother, even if they acknowledge that my brother deserved it. I feel completely lost. Has anyone ever been in a situation like this? How do I find a way to keep both my husband and my family in my life? Edit for clarification. I am choosing my husband. That was never in question. But I don't want to lose my family in the process. Family has always meant everything to me, and I just want to find a way to keep both. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 1. First off, I just want to thank everyone who took the time to comment, offer advice, and support me through this. I also want to apologize if my original post was worded poorly. I was in a highly emotional state when I wrote it, and I wasn't thinking as clearly as I should have. Now, I know it might seem early for an update, but things have taken a turn, and honestly, I'm more confused than ever. After everything that happened, my parents reached out and invited me over to talk. However, they specifically requested that I come alone because they did not want my husband at their house. That didn't sit well with my husband at all. He told me flat out that if he wasn't welcome, then I wasn't going either. He said, "If you go alone, they'll just pile on you, and I'm not letting that happen." And honestly, he was probably right. So we went together. As expected, my parents were not happy when they saw him walk in with me. My mother started to say something, but my husband immediately shut it down. He told her, "I'm not here for you. I'm here for my wife. If you force me to leave, she's leaving with me." I backed him up without hesitation. My parents reluctantly let us stay. And then, things got even weirder. My brother was there, too. He has a broken nose and chipped teeth from the punch, and he refused to look at either of us. He just kept staring at the ground, even when he spoke. I had no idea what to expect from this conversation, but what I didn't expect was the reason behind his behavior. Apparently, my brother broke up with his girlfriend about a month ago, or more accurately, she broke up with him. I had no idea this had even happened because we aren't close like that, and frankly, I don't care about his relationship drama. But according to him, the reason he lashed out at me during the barbecue was because of my life. He said that my perfect life with my husband kept popping up on his social media feeds, and it made him jealous. Now, I don't even post that often. The only things I ever share online are photos with my husband, vacations, date nights, anniversary posts, stuff like that. I don't use social media for anything else, so apparently, his feed was full of my posts, and he couldn't handle seeing me happy while his own relationship fell apart. And then, it got worse. He overheard a private conversation I had with my mother about children. My husband and I are currently trying for a baby, and somehow, that really sent him over the edge. His life was falling apart, and in his mind, mine was going perfectly. I had the happy marriage, the stability, and now I was actively trying to have what he wanted with his ex, a family. That was his breaking point. He admitted that he didn't take my husband seriously when he pulled him aside at the barbecue and warned him to stop. He thought he could say whatever he wanted to me, and there wouldn't be any consequences. But here's what I still don't understand. I asked him why he went after me specifically. Why not vent to a friend? Why not talk to our parents? Why direct all his frustration at me when none of it was actually my fault? He wouldn't answer. So I pushed further. I asked him about the whore comment, because that's the part that hurt the most. He knows that my husband was my first in everything. He knows I've only ever been with my husband all these years. So where did that even come from? Again, no answer. So I asked, does trying to have a baby with my husband make me a whore? Because that's what sex is, right? And do you know what he did? He got up and left the room. He couldn't even look at me. He just walked out without saying a single word. I'm honestly still trying to process everything. On one hand, I now understand why he lashed out, but on the other hand, I don't feel bad for him. His breakup doesn't justify his actions. His jealousy doesn't excuse his words. And the fact that my own parents are still trying to make my husband out to be the villain is beyond frustrating. For anyone wondering, yes, my husband is still my choice. That has never changed. I have no intention of leaving him, and I never once questioned that. But I am questioning what kind of relationship I can even have with my family after this. I've always been close with them, but the way they've handled this situation has completely changed how I see them. I just don't know what to do moving forward. How do you even rebuild a relationship with family members who would rather defend an insult than acknowledge how deeply hurtful it was? How do I have a future with them when I know they won't ever accept my husband, despite the fact that he was the only one who stood up for me? I still don't want to lose my family, but at this point, I don't know if there's anything left to hold on to. If anyone has been in a similar situation, I'd really appreciate any advice. Update 2. First off, I just want to say thank you again to everyone who has been following this situation and offering support. It means more than I can express. Things have progressed, and while some things have become clearer, I'm still left feeling hurt and unsure about where I stand with my family. After the conversation with my brother, I had one more question that I needed to ask my parents. Why didn't they step in? Why didn't they say something when my brother was humiliating me in front of everyone? Why didn't they tell him to stop? Why didn't they tell him to leave if he couldn't control himself? My father admitted that he wanted to, but my mother told him to leave my brother alone because, in her words, he wasn't actually hurting anyone. That hit me hard. So, apparently, I wasn't actually being hurt? Being called a whore in front of my entire family wasn't enough to warrant intervention? Being belittled and degraded all day didn't count? I also asked them about the ultimatum. Why did they put me in that position? Why did they make me feel like I had to choose between my husband and them? My father admitted that the ultimatum wasn't his idea, it was my mother's. He just went along with it. And that's when it became painfully clear. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to protect my brother. So I asked, what about me? Silence. Not a single word. No defense, no justification, just silence. That told me everything I needed to know. My husband actually did apologize to my parents, not because he regretted defending me, but because he acknowledged that the situation had escalated. However, when my mother asked him to apologize to my brother, he outright refused. He said, "No, I won't apologize for standing up for my wife." He was warned, and he didn't listen. He got what he deserved. My mother was furious. She told him that no matter what, hitting my brother was unacceptable. That's when my husband turned to my dad and asked, "What would you do if someone called your wife a whore?" My dad responded, "I would have a talk with that person, but I would never hit someone." And my husband laughed. He looked my dad straight in the eye and said, "You're a weak-willed, spineless man if you let someone demean your wife like that and do nothing." That was it. My mother turned red with anger, and I could see it all boiling over. That's when I told my husband it was time to leave. Before we left, I told my parents that I would be going low contact with them. I told them that their ultimatum broke the trust one had in them. I understood that they wanted to protect my brother, but in doing so, they hurt me. They made it clear that I didn't matter as much. That seemed to take all the fight out of my mother. She asked if I was cutting them off completely, and I told her, "That's up to you. If they could respect my wishes, maybe we could rebuild something. But right now, I want nothing to do with my brother, because he still can't even apologize for what he said to me." As we were leaving, my husband still politely greeted my parents before walking out. But as he shook my dad's hand, he told him, "It's time to grow a backbone." And this was the most interesting part. I don't know what I saw in my mother's face at that moment, but I think it was shame. Because after my husband said that, my dad looked at my mom, and she immediately looked away from him. I don't know what that means, but it felt like something unspoken passed between them. On the way home, my husband apologized for possibly escalating things, but he told me that it was time someone told my dad the truth. He told me not to worry or stress about anything, that whatever punishment comes, he'll take it and deal with any fallout. Later that night, I got a message from my cousin. Apparently, after we left, the rest of the family called my parents out for allowing my brother to talk to me the way he did. And for the first time, my parents admitted the truth. My brother's ex cheated on him. He begged her to fix things, but she chose the other guy. Ever since then, he's been pissed off at every woman and convinced that we're all the same. That eventually, every woman will betray the man she's with. So when he saw my happy, stable marriage, when he overheard that I was trying to have a baby, it just made all of his resentment boil over. In his mind, I had everything he wanted and lost. And instead of dealing with his emotions in a healthy way, he lashed out at me. The worst part? My parents knew this. They knew why he did it, but they couldn't bring themselves to tell me when I was right there asking for answers. Instead, they sat there, silent, and refused to acknowledge what had actually happened. At this point, I don't know what my relationship with my parents will look like moving forward. I know that I can't trust them the way I used to, and I know that I need space. As for my brother, I'm done with him. Maybe one day, if he actually takes responsibility for his actions, I'll reconsider, but right now, I have nothing to say to him. My husband is still my choice. That hasn't changed. And after everything, I appreciate him even more for standing by me and protecting me when no one else would. I still don't know what to do about my family, but one thing is clear, I deserve better than this. TLDR, my parents admitted that they protected my brother because they knew he was lashing out over his ex cheating on him. They still expected my husband to apologize, and when my dad said he wouldn't hit someone over an insult, my husband called him spineless. I told my parents I'm going low contact, and the rest of my family called him out after we left. My husband reassured me that I don't have to stress because he'll handle any fallout. As for my brother, he still refuses to apologize, so I'm done with him for now.